Senator Amy Klobuchar, currently in the Senate and of the great state of Minnesota, another longtime colleague of Senator Feinstein. Senator, thank you for being here. I want to ask a question I was going to ask Senator Boxer, but I think I'm going to give it to you now. So there's some concern among some constituents in California that the bipartisanship that Senator Feinstein championed, this idea of reaching across the aisle as much as humanly possible, is perhaps going to die with her, or already has died, and it's not the same as it used to be, and won't ever be the same. Do you feel that? Is that a correct assumption about the United States Senate right now?
Look, there have been changes. We know that it's not as easy. But right now, you see the Senate being grown-ups. Nearly 80 senators supported a bipartisan bill that Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer negotiated, right? With Senator Schumer's leadership, it would take us through the middle of November and allow us to do a final budget for next year. And consistently, we've had major Republican support for that. I can't speak to the House, but I think Diane's legacy continues. You heard the tributes from people like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Patty Murray, Democrats and Republicans. She was their mentor. For me, I was listening to Barbara with a smile. Yeah. She was such a character, Diane. And you don't have as many characters these days. She just held her head high. She would disagree with people within her own party. She, at one point, I stayed at her house in San Francisco after a political event. She kicked the men out and said, well, you stay here at this beautiful house. And in the morning at about 7:30, she summoned me to her room where she was sitting up ramrod straight in her furry big slippers, reading on a Saturday morning a 200-page draft of the Patent Reform Act, and started grilling me on questions. That was Diane. She came in to power at a time where women had to be prepared. Yeah. They had to be serious. They couldn't have a lot of emotion. And that kind of model for me really helped me when I got to the Senate.
I wonder what you learned from her in terms of getting things done. It's a stated fact that women get more done in Congress than the men do. Women reach across the aisle more. They pass more legislation. They're behind more successful legislation. Did you learn anything from her about how to get things done?
Yeah, to be fearless and to not give up. You think of that torture report. She was isolated on some of that, where she investigated what had been happening in Iraq. And who came to join her on the Senate floor? John McCain, because of the relationship they built over the past and that he had his own personal horrific experience with torture. She was able to pass landmark legislation on the assault weapon ban. She was able to lead on conservation issues for California, as Barbara pointed out. And maybe it was she came into power when hardly any women were running major cities. And it was through a tragedy, this assassination of the mayor and of Harvey Milk. And she had to stand before the nation and tell them what had happened and take over the reins and always lead. And that leadership through the storms was still there. And for me, for young women now, trying to get them to run for things, sometimes they're like, it's too brutal, I can't handle it, I don't want to get attacked. I always think of Diane, the mission and what she was trying to get done, and her responsibility for whatever day it was or committee it was would rule over anything that happened on the sides. She led, and that's her model.
She wasn't afraid to stand up to some powerful men as well, even getting an apology out of the CIA director, John Brennan, a few years ago. Let me ask you about bipartisan gun legislation, the assault weapons ban. She championed it. She fought for it even after it was sunsetted. She was still fighting for it up until the end. Do you see that ever coming to pass again? Will her life's work in this area get fulfilled again eventually?
I believe at some point we will pass gun safety legislation again. And I think it was some tribute to her that Democrats and Republicans came together with President Biden's leadership just a summer ago and passed that gun safety bill. That meant that a number of Republicans had to take on the NRA and some leaders in their own party to get it done. But after what happened in Uvalde, after what happened in Buffalo, the horror of the people and these kids being killed, enough was enough. And so the fact that Dianne never gave up and kept championing the cause, its time came and will come again. And without her leadership, we wouldn't have gotten to where we were, to at least pass once again some gun safety legislation.
Yeah.